It's been a few weeks since RE3 2020 released, to many mixed feelings. I myself loved the game, but upon first playthrough, admittedly, I also felt quite mixed about a lot of things this game did. The title felt more reimagined than it did remade, and while that isn't necessarily a bad thing, new stuff is always great, when something sports the name Resident Evil 3, it should probably resemble its original counterpart at least a little. While the game is still selling like hotcakes, a lot of RE fans were left sadly disappointed with this remake's take on classic events and environmental changes. Today we'll be talking about all of those things, everything I wasn't able to speak on in my initial review. We're covering gameplay, almost everything. So if you haven't played the game yet, go do that. By the way, feelings are about to get very mixed. This is the full review you've all been asking for. An important note to keep in mind before we start is that this video will primarily focus on gameplay and structure, not so much on the story. I think the narrative stuff in this game is almost perfect. Okay, let's get started. So, the first thing I want to talk about is a gameplay spoiler. Yes, I feel the Carlos sections are pretty spoilery because there are two this time, and the one that showed up in the original is completely redesigned. So Carlos plays differently from Jill, sporting his signature assault rifle that is extremely satisfying to use. Instead of dodging enemy attacks, Carlos can charge enemies. The basic charge is a shoulder check that you can use to bypass enemies. But if you hit this action perfectly, Carlos will legitimately riposte an enemy attack with a badass punch to the face. Getting the punch right leads to a slow-mo perfect shot like Jill's. This punch and charge is awesome, and if you know the timing, you will feel so cool doing this consistently. Like I said earlier, Carlos has two of his own levels in this game. One where he takes a walk through the RPD, replacing Jill's quest through the familiar precinct, and of course, his emergency visit to the hospital. Instead of jumping forward to these areas, let's take a quick step back and analyze the areas that came before these two. One problem a lot of people have with this game is its overall linear structure. I briefly mentioned this potentially being divisive in my review. Now that the game's been out, it's basically been negatively received across the board, and I totally understand why. RE3R starts incredibly strong with an amazing scripted Nemesis chase scene through Jill's apartment building. This leads to a very on-rails sequence where we basically blast through the first part of the original game. Literally the entire Uptown area of RE399 is covered here in about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how long you stay in Jill's apartment. I love this sequence. I think most people do. It perfectly sets up the frantic tone of the story, the characters, the main threat, and Jill herself. The problem is that all of this was an actual open-ended, explorable area in the original RE3. After you complete this scene, you can never go back to Uptown. Dario Rosso actually got more screen time in 99 than he does here. His interactions are super quick, and like I just said, you can't come back to this area to see his full story play out. It kinda sucks for story completionists like myself. When I got to the train station, I noticed on my second playthrough that you could actually go back up the stairs. As I climbed each step, I prayed that Dario would be there waiting for me. Sadly, nothing's here. Well, except for a bobblehead. STARS member Brad is also in this opening, and while his total screen time is pretty short, I absolutely loved everything centered around this character. From the files you could read in Jill's apartment to his brave exit at Bar Jack. It's all fantastic and serves as a somewhat redemption arc for his cowardly past deeds. I'll talk about Brad's fate later. Nemesis ambushing Jill in her apartment is, in my opinion, a much better introduction than RE399's random apartment explosion. I always saw that intro as pretty weird, like we missed a big chunk of the game's start. Actually getting a full sequence before Jill jumps through that exploding doorway was a treat, to say the least. Oh my god, I love the shot where the camera goes over Nemi's shoulder as he's chasing you. It's so threatening. Also, Jill literally driving Nemesis off the side of a building was one of the most badass moves in Resident Evil history. The intro is great. I really liked it. The first fully playable section of this game is the downtown area. This part is an explorable hub, and there's a lot to do and see here. Picking locks, cutting chains, finding items. It's very Resident Evil in its gameplay loop. It'll probably take you about 40 minutes to explore this entire place. This area is pretty strange because it happens to feature almost every location in RE399's downtown, but the difference here is that all of that stuff was condensed into a few city blocks, instead of being stretched over an entire neighborhood. There are things from RE399 that are missing, but for the most part, you'll be like, oh, there's the substation. Oh look, there's the pharmacy. Wow, the Aquacure girl is really hot now. Downtown is the best part of RE3R overall. Completing the substation is when Nemesis finally shows up to stalk you through this part of town. It's amazing, really. He can intercept you, show up when you least expect it, and actually follow you into one of the save rooms, which really caught me off guard. The problem with Nemesis, and this is my biggest complaint with this remake, is that once you escape through the sewers, that's it for him stalking you like this throughout the rest of the game. All of this persistent monster's appearances are either scripted chases or boss fights, and that's honestly pretty disappointing. Not only from an RE399 perspective, but from an RE2R perspective. It's bizarre because if you look back at RE298, Mr.X in that game had like 5 easily avoidable encounters that all felt 100% scripted. RE399 was the step up from that, having Nemesis feel like he was following you through the entire early game, even though he also was 100% scripted depending on what paths you took. It's backwards for these remakes. Mr.X is more Nemi than Nemi. Nemesis feels more in line with OG RE2 Mr.X. That is not how this should work. If Nemesis is going to be in a new game, a remake of his debut title for that matter, that experience should be the ultimate Resident Evil chase game, not this one-and-done dynamic gameplay situation. It's hard to talk about fixing this problem since RE3R after this point basically goes on rails. You'd have to redesign the game as a semi-open world to make Nemesis even feel a little like he's pursuing you. The more I think about this, the more I wish Capcom would have just followed the open world trend with this game. Like, if any RE title has to go open world, it should be Nemesis's wild Raccoon City hunt for stars. Obviously, this is all wishful thinking and very much impossible now considering the game's development is done at this point. One thing I can say about making Nemi feel more involved is to have him stalk you as soon as you leave the train station and to put him in the sewers. Yeah, replace one of the Hunter Gamma with Nemesis. How terrifying would it be to narrowly escape him only to see him walk around this particular corner as if nothing's changed? Keep him on this ground floor, and if you do enough damage, he'll either run away or just faceplant into the disgusting sewer water. I think this would be a very doable patch in the future. I hope something like this happens. It would make for an awesome challenge and have this persistent monster feel like he's more part of the game. If this never happens officially, hey modders, let's talk. Speaking of the sewer, before we move on,
come on, you creepy ass stalker! You want stars? I'll give you stars!
So, believe it or not, the repositioning of this one line is my biggest problem with RE3R. Jill's voice actress, Nicole Tompkins, delivers this line perfectly. Why it's used as a throwaway piece of banter during a random chase scene, which can be interrupted by the way,
you creepy ass stalker! You want stars?
boggles my mind. If you guys don't know this line is like my favorite video game one-liner. I know people think it's cheesy, and admittedly it is to an extent, but as a kid I thought it was legendary. It was inspiring, not only seeing, but hearing Jill own Nemesis with this line. After a full game of this stupid monster chasing you around uttering that single word, Jill and the player destroy him with the satisfaction of giving him exactly what he wants through the barrel of a 357 lobotomy. It's so badass. To have that moment, that iconic line, be reduced to Jill just running away from Nemesis, well, it made me sad. Look, I know I'm probably the only person that cares this much about a single line of dialogue, but it meant something to me. That first playthrough of RE399 was magical. I was so young, and the line was like the coolest thing I had ever heard. It's something that stuck with me my entire life. That one moment made Jill my favorite character. I love Jill's voice actress in this game. She does the line so much justice. It's a shame that it's optional and placed at this point in the game, though. At least it got recorded. Alright, rant over. After the sewer, Jill finds herself ascending a building under construction as Nemesis burns it down with his newly acquired flamethrower. I love everything about this set piece. Once you reach the top of the building is when you face off against this fiery guy. I like this fight because with his flamethrower, Nemesis is slower. He's got a variety of moves like raining down fireballs on the player, which looks amazing by the way, a few close-up melee hits, and a constant stream of flames. Once you blow up the fuel tank is when this creature gains a speed boost. It's so satisfying, perfect dodging each of his heavy swings in succession. Nemi also has a legit stinger like Dante, which is devastating if it makes contact. You can also perfect dodge this attack as well. So if you play this fight perfectly, Jill will look like a total badass, styling all over this undead idiot. This battle is great. For as much as I love that entire sequence, I can't really say I completely loved what happens next. God, what an entrance. Why'd they make him so cool in this game? So here we are. Rocket Nemi has finally entered the building to be a 100% avoidable on-rails scripted set piece. Nemesis in this encounter chases you down a carefully placed sequence of corridors for about 3 minutes. By the way, the giant head on top of the toy store gets shot down and Jill has to run away from it RE4 style. I like this, but it's insane. The worst part about this battle is that it's actually really fun. Just sticking around and taking him down, earning a valuable supply crate in the process, is so rewarding. It's just a shame this set piece is like 2 minutes long, and there's literally no communicated incentive to even fight this battle. The rocket launcher cutscene is great. The actual fighting part is fun. You're literally dodging rockets. What's not to love about that? It's such a giant missed opportunity. Imagine being up on higher ground and having Nemesis shoot up at you, or vice versa. There are so many gameplay scenarios that I could come up with right now to make this better. It's just a shame we got what seems like the lowest effort for Nemi's most iconic appearance. This moment should have been the perfect open-ended gameplay segment. After regrouping with Carlos, Jill heads out of the city with Mikhail and Nikolai via a train, leaving Carlos and Tyrell behind. I love this cutscene so much. After a few very suspicious encounters with Nikolai, Mikhail begins to let on that he knows that this cold-blooded mercenary is up to something. The subtlety in the delivery of the lines is what makes this scene so memorable. The performances really sell it. Mikhail is the MVP after all. And after Nemesis boards the train, we get a pretty badass exit for this old soldier.
No, they're gone. Come, this way.
Nikolai, what are you doing?
It's not after you.
Nikolai!
Get off my train, shitbird!
This scene is so awesome. After this, we switch over to Carlos to explore the RPD. Right out of the gate, this level hits you with something pretty intense.
Brad, stop! T. Come on, man. Not you too. Sorry. Sorry.
I know there's been a lot of controversy over this scene. It's very different from the original, but guys, I like it a lot. Not only does it give Brad a more meaningful death, but it enriches Marvin's story from RE2R. We actually get to see how and who he was bitten by, and oh my god, is it heartbreaking. It gives this line a hell of a lot more meaning now.
And don't make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. You take it out, or you run. Got it?
If Brad pathetically died cowering in a corner in the exact same way, I'd be fine with it, but it wouldn't fit with this game's portrayal of his character. It'd be really jarring. Having him go out saving Jill holding back a horde of zombies, and then using his last shred of humanity to apologize to one of his friends for what he was about to do to him, well, that's just amazing. This reimagined scene is exactly what I needed from Brad. Brad still dies in front of the RPD, and by the way, him biting Marvin here is actually a callback to Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. Yeah, this is actually a deep cut, but I'm so glad they did it this way. The only thing I can think of to make this scene a bit better is if after you put down Brad, his head would turn into an NE Alpha parasite, meaning he would have gotten infected by Nemesis at some point. Capcom, please hire me. Or just take these ideas wholesale and patch your game. I don't mind. Take them. Carlos's trip through the RPD is very enjoyable. You get to see how some of the RPD officers bit the dust in RE2R. We get even more sassy Carlos, which by the way, I freaking love this version of Carlos so much.
Now here's a weird fucking door.
Leave it. We're here for
I never thought I'd be saying that based on the original RE3. Carlos's actor, Jeff Shine, did a fantastic job at making this previous goofball a very cool, smooth-talking, lovable merc. The gameplay here is simple. Carlos chooses to take down zombies head-on with his assault rifle. There are lickers in the RPD as well, which I definitely was not expecting. After reaching the STARS office, we switch back to Jill waking up in the wreckage of her recent train derailment. Leaving the train tunnel behind, we're greeted by an absolutely breathtaking sight, the clock tower. So the lead up to the tower is a little different this time. You have to cross a bridge to get to the building, but once you set foot on this bridge is when we get one of the best RE quotes of all time.
Bitch can't even swim. Look. It's back!
Jill, what happened? Jill, come in!
So this is Nemi's second form. It's drastically different from his original humanoid tentacle body. I really don't hate this change. I think he looks really cool being more monstrous like this. Kinda like a Bloodborne boss. Very blood-starved beast, good hunter. This boss is fun to fight too. Are you guys seeing a trend here? Nemesis has obvious giant wind-up animations for his attacks that are easily dodgeable but inflict a ton of damage if they make contact. There's a phase where he runs around the arena until eventually climbing the clock tower, and it looks so sick. The trick here is to plant a mine in his path to knock him out of his loop. By the way, the mine thrower was axed from this game. Instead, Jill's grenade launcher gets mine rounds, which are blue, and I got really excited because I thought they were freeze rounds, and I love my freeze rounds. I was a little disappointed by their exclusion, but at least we don't have to deal with the mine thrower anymore. A fun detail about this version of Nemesis is when he's incapacitated, his chest opens up, revealing the NE alpha parasite painfully squirming around. I guess that's what was in that device on his chest. After the battle, Jill gets infected, like you'd imagine. Carlos comes to save her, and we move right along to the hospital. That's right, guys. The clock tower level was not included in this game. It's a huge letdown. The clock tower is one of the most iconic Resident Evil locations, and not having it here feels like a big chunk of the game is missing. It hurts too, because right before the doggy Nemesis fight, you can read a file that details the clock tower's history and gives you a description of what the inside of this building looks like. It's like the game is getting you ready to explore this brand new location. It also doesn't help that it seems like Jill is about to walk into the tower after the fight and gets interrupted by Nemesis. This omission is really tough to deal with. I loved the clock tower in the original, and I really hope at some point we can get it back in this game, but I won't hold my breath on that. Oh my god, there are so many ways you can integrate that level without having to change anything. Okay, bear with me for a second and try to imagine this. Jill has nightmares in this game. Make her have a weird fever dream that takes place while she's unconscious in the wreckage of the train crash. She's stuck in the exact same clock tower from the original, but this time the front door leading outside is locked, needing 3 novelty key items. You'd have to solve those same 2 classic puzzles, the music box and the gems and clocks riddles, to get the keys. An all-new encounter that would take place would see Jill exploring the basement of the tower. After solving the first 2 puzzles, you'd get a special key to the basement where you'd finally fight some giant spiders in a nasty BOW nest. After taking out a very Black Tiger-esque queen spider is when you'd get the final key. The twist is, now Nemi's original form 2 is stalking you for the rest of your visit. With the front door now unlocked, Jill has to reach the top to ring the tower's bell, adding in another sequence of normal Nemesis gameplay. Since this would be a very dreamlike situation, you'd still get that silly, "we're saved" cutscene like in the original game. But then the nightmare ends with Nemesis shooting down this helicopter again. When Jill wakes up from the train is where you'd get this game's real Nemi 2 fight. Literally all that would have to be done is to slot this new scenario into the default game structure. It would give Jill a third nightmare for the story and at least an extra hour of gameplay, extending the runtime, adding in much needed puzzles, and a highly requested enemy type in the giant spiders. Capcom, just take this idea. If we ever get any DLC, make it this. Please, you'd be making so many people happy. Moving on from my crushed hopes and dreams, the hospital is the next portion of this game, and I've gotta say, it's pretty good. Part 1 sees Carlos exploring on his own, looking for a cure for Jill's infection. The hospital has an awesome color palette and atmosphere. There's some decent exploration with optional side rooms to unlock, keys to find, and we get our introduction to the hunters, and like I said in my review, they're perfect. Very fun to fight against, and counterpunch them in their big dumb lizard faces. I really like this part of the game, but it's plagued with one of the worst pieces of mandatory content in the series. Question: do you guys like the RE4 cabin? Well, Capcom sure does. They keep putting it in their games, and RE3R is the latest victim of this cursed level design. After administering the vaccine, a horde of zombies approaches the building, and it's up to Carlos to keep them at bay while Tyrell works on getting the shutters closed. I love the idea of Carlos single-handedly taking on a horde of zombies to protect Jill and one of his best friends. But this could have been done way better than the thing we actually got. So like RE4's cabin, zombies continuously flood into the room. This sequence actually has technical issues, like zombies exploding after being killed with a comical Nickelodeon splat sound effect. What is that? Why did they think that was a good thing to put in the game? Seriously though, I've heard and seen glitches occur in this battle. It's almost like the RE engine wasn't built for this type of thing. Yeah, this part is pretty bad, but I like the idea of it at the very least. By the way, RE4 was the only game that did the cabin good. Stop putting it in your games, Capcom. I don't think anyone likes it. Part 2 of the hospital takes place after Jill awakens, and it's really only cleanup, gathering up items Carlos couldn't get or forgot to pick up. It's fun. I love the open-ended gameplay of RE3R. I just wish there was more of it. The hospital's basement is a giant puzzle room where you have to find 3 fuses to restore the power to the area. There are some decent surprises in this location, and the item hunt was fun enough and didn't overstay its welcome. After restoring this area's power is when Tyrell finally catches up to Jill and the two head into this new mysterious environment, not before Nemi shows up to waste Tyrell. Poor guy. Estúpido perro. Nemesis chases Jill into this game's new lab sequence. There's no dead factory in this game either. Instead, we get Nest 2. I'm not totally bothered by this exclusion. I quite like the new super future Nest labs these reimaginings are bringing us, but I will admit, I love and dearly miss the dirty, metallic, industrial labs of the original RE2 and 3. There's something so terrifying about a squeaky clean pharmaceutical company having a dark, dank facility just under the surface filled with these monsters that you'd only ever see in your wildest nightmares. These new labs are literally squeaky clean. Big contrast, but yeah, I'm a fan of both aesthetics. This lab is very focused. The goal is to make another batch of vaccine before escaping the city. It's a typical Resident Evil ending sequence, focusing heavily on running and gunning while solving brain-dead puzzles and fighting a few bosses. A few standouts here are the Palehead zombies, which are regenerating zombies that have a cool body reconstruction effect going on when healing themselves. The room where the tyrants and hunters are created was also really cool to see. I love how Jill verbally lets us know that she knows what these giant gray guys are because 2 months prior, she fought one of these things in the Spencer Mansion. By the way, this game is packed with so many tiny details and lore callbacks. It's a lot of fun. I feel like every day someone's discovering something new about this game. After creating another vaccine, Jill is jumped by Nemesis, narrowly escaping the monster's grasp. We find ourselves in a very familiar situation. The file you can read just before entering this big room talks about drenching BOWs in acid. So yeah, you know what's about to happen in just a few minutes. When Nemesis eventually catches up to Jill, he falls into the waste disposal pit, and Nikolai forces Jill to fight the giant monster while he takes off with the vaccine. This battle is similar to the first Monster Nemi fight. This time he's got a big tentacle arm to swing at you from long range. It's somewhat accurate to the original game. The idea is there at least. After doing enough damage, Carlos comes to Jill's aid to offer support with spotting Nemi. Nemesis hides behind the acid tanks above Jill and jumps down at her if you fail to act quickly in shocking Nemi out of his hiding spot. This boss is really fun, a lot like the first Monster Nemesis fight, on the standard and hardcore difficulties. On the bonus Nightmare and Inferno modes, it becomes a real chore to get through. For some god-awful reason, on the higher difficulties, the camera is stuck zoomed in whenever Nemesis gets close to Jill. It's almost impossible to judge distance, and it could leave you getting hit or grabbed by a few cheap shots. I really don't know how this got past testing. I'm kinda convinced the devs didn't even test these modes. On your first go-around in Nightmare, it's super frustrating. It requires total mastery of the dodge system and a few good educated guesses. It feels busted, but thankfully on the normal difficulty settings, this fight is awesome, like the clock tower battle. Defeating the monster once again sees it being bathed in a pool of acid. Getting to higher ground, Jill pursues Nikolai further, but is once again interrupted by the stalkerish creature.
City's about to explode, and you can't put a price on life.
Good luck!
Nikolai!
Jill!
Go after Nikolai! He's got the vaccine!
What about you?
We're running out of time. I've got this.
I know you do.
Look, just so you know, this is the last fucking time.
God, what could they do to make this battle even more hype?
Now what?
Cooldown in progress. Please reactivate power sources.
Damn, it needs power.
Okay, I'll be honest. When I first saw this scene, it was like all of the game's problems up to this point melted from my mind for a little while. Literally, this entire boss fight feels like it was made just for me. It's the most hype thing I've ever seen. The way the classic track Final Metamorphosis kicks in as the batteries pop out of the wall and the railgun runs out of energy, holy shit. I can't believe what I'm looking at right now. I hear you complaining though. How is Jill firing this energy weapon that is taller than her? How are her ankles not broken? Bitch, please, have you seen her ass? I know you have because the camera always wants to show you. With a cake like that, I'm surprised Jill isn't leaping over the RPD in a single bound. Don't take this moment away from her. If Code Veronica Chris can do it, if 19-year-old college student Claire can handle a frickin' minigun with almost no kickback like a champ, Jill can do this. She's a member of STAR's Alpha team. Jesus, this video is all over the place. I guess they really scaled down the tech by the time they got to Vendetta. Oh, what's that? You want to lead Nemesis in front of the railgun? How about being the railgun? Oh my god, I can't believe this game. So, hype aside, the actual fight is really easy on standard difficulty, very balanced and enjoyable on hardcore, and absolutely busted on Nightmare and Inferno. Skyscraper Nemi will attack you with a few different ground slaps, a sweep, stun you with a roar, one-shot you if you get too close, and when you pop one of his gross polyps, acid will cover a section of the arena. Most of these attacks are dodgeable though. The goal is to pop all of the polyps on Nemesis's body, and while he's downed, set each railgun battery into place. Once the battery is back online, Nemi will regain consciousness. On hardcore, this fight will last about 3 waves. On Inferno difficulty, his ground slaps can go up to 9 hits. That means you have to perfect dodge all 9 attacks in sequence before you can even think about returning fire. Why not just fire and dodge in between his attacks, you might be wondering? Well, that doesn't work on these modes because Nemi's attacks stun lock Jill. And guess what? 2 to 3 hits and Jill's dead. It's extremely unfair. My very first attempt on Nightmare lasted 37 minutes. That's half an hour for one boss fight in a survival horror game. It feels very broken. I highly recommend when you get to this point on these difficulties to use the unlockable defense and assault coins, as well as the dodge book. I just thought I should talk about this because it's not good design. Like, at all. I've gotten much better at taking down Nightmare Nemi, but not everyone else wants to devote that much time to learning how to fairly fight a broken boss like this. Anyway, once you get all the batteries back into place, the hype continues.
All power sources activated. Powering
I am
up.
sick of your shit! Come on! Next time, take the fucking hit!
God, I love you, Jill. Shoutouts to my fellow girl gamers that felt Jill's energy in that moment. I love everything about that final shot, but you know what would make it even better?
You want stars? I'll give you stars!
No, that's what I'm talking about. Jill and Carlos beat Nikolai, leave his punk ass behind, and then go off to start a life together. Wait, oh my god, they remade the song? They completely remade the credits song. One of my favorite pieces of Resident Evil music. But they couldn't do the clock tower? This game is going to be the end of me. I'm sure I don't have to say this at all, but geez, is this title the epitome of mixed feelings. As its own thing, divorced from the original RE3, I think it's great. As a remake of RE3 though, not so much. After weeks of mulling it over and countless hours of playtime, I can still confidently say the game is worth a playthrough. That being said, I would feel a bit more comfortable bumping my review score down from an 8 to a 7.5. It takes some ideas from RE399 and absolutely runs with them, in some cases making them better. Unfortunately, most of the original RE3's ideas, this game is running from, and that's very unfortunate. The story, characters, gameplay, and presentation are all 10s from me. Game structure, lack of Nemesis, lack of Raccoon City, that stuff definitely sticks out in the worst possible ways. I really want to see more from these versions of Jill and Carlos. The chemistry between them is off the charts. Hell, the charts don't even exist anymore when those two are on screen together. We've talked about missed opportunities a lot in this video, and while I like what was done with Jill and Nemi's rivalry, once you get to that railgun kill, as awesome as it is, and for as much as I loved it, it feels a little unearned. And like we've all been saying, that comes down to the lack of Nemesis throughout the entire game. There just needed to be more fights and chases with him, period. Honestly, the release of this game hasn't been the most fun. I was so excited for this title. After my initial playthrough, I was fine with what I had played, but I also really felt the omissions. The game is lacking in too many areas. It has decent replay value despite what armies of people on the internet are saying. The problem with said replay value is that the content on offer isn't as meaningful as some other RE titles. The unlockables are fun, don't get me wrong, the STARS outfit in particular, that costume is 100 out of 10. But there really should have been extra modes. Put in the mercenaries, put in a few more costumes, put in an alternate ending for crying out loud. Where the hell is Barry? It's obvious RE3R needed more development time, and I don't really see why it didn't get a little extra love and care. Almost everything about this game screams extended director's cut later on. With that being said, this game was made primarily by M2, a dev team comprised of ex-Platinum Games staff. I'm sure hearing that puts a lot of this game's design in perspective. That Metal Gear Rising looking railgun, the more linear level layouts, and all of the action elements are clearly Platinum inspired. While I think M2 did a fine job with the thing we got, I'm kinda nervous about the future of these remakes, if rumors of their further involvement prove to be true. If things proceed like this, I'm sure I will still have fun with what's to come, but I already know without Dev 1 behind the wheel, making those important decisions, we probably won't be seeing 9 out of 10 bangers like RE2R and DMC5 for a while. I know it's really early to say something like that, things can always change, and from what I can tell, RE3R seems like the first M2 game of this scale. And I'd like to believe they'd only get better after this. Like I've said before, this game does great things, but it's just not fully there. It's not a trash fire, it's not 0 out of 10, it's just fine. And I think a lot of that has to do with the dev team responsible for making this thing. These reimaginings of RE2 and 3 are new games in their own right, and yeah, they should be judged fairly. I feel like I've only ever been fair to these games. And yeah, I love new things, but man do I wish this game was more faithful to its original counterpart. I hope going forward, the next few projects developed by either Dev 1 or M2, at most, exude that original quality that Dev 1 has been providing prior to this game's release. All we could do now is wait and see what happens. I really hope we get an extended cut of RE3R in the future, maybe for next gen? In any event, I still enjoyed Jill Valentine's new adventure, cut content and all, but I really hope her next game is a smash hit with everyone. Let's hope future Resident Evil titles give us a few more shining stars, 'cause I don't know if I can survive another game like this. Hey everyone, I am so exhausted, legitimately. I hope you enjoyed this very, very mixed feelings video. I love this game and most of the stuff it does, but yeah, some of the creative decisions were pretty baffling. I think most people feel that way about this title. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon link down below. Now that we're done with 2 epic RE3R reviews, I think it's time to move on to something else for a while. I really hope you guys are staying safe in these terribly boring times and staying occupied the best way you can. I hear Animal Crossing is pretty good for that. Anyway, guys, I'll be talking to you all next time. I have a feeling something wicked is right around the corner. Later.